You might think this is just about a dessert denied to a 10-year-old. It is not. That sentence. Only family gets to eat. Triggered 33 frantic calls the next morning. They were not calling to apologize to my son, but to save their assets. Once I realized my name was on the deed, I decided that if I was not family at the dinner table, they would not get to treat me like family at the bank. My name is Faith Stewart, and if you asked my mother, she would tell you that my defining trait is being difficult in the Stewart family lexicon. Difficult is a polite code word for independent. It means I pay my own mortgage, I do not ask for handouts, and I do not bend the knee to the unspoken hierarchy that governs our family dinners. I am 35 years old, a single mother, and a risk analyst at a firm called Crescent Pine Risk Solutions. My job is literally to assess potential disasters and mitigate them before they destroy everything. It is ironic, then, that I did not see the catastrophe of Christmas Eve coming until it was staring me in the face, holding a serving spoon. The drive from my modest duplex in Milwaukee to my parents' sprawling estate in Brookfield always felt like traveling between two different planets. My world was practical, cozy, and lived in. Their world was manicured to within an inch of its life. As I pulled my sedan into the circular driveway, the house loomed large, draped in tasteful white lights that probably cost more to install than my monthly grocery budget. "Remember, buddy," I said, glancing in the rearview mirror at Evan. He was 10 years old, wearing the sweater vest he had picked out himself because he wanted to look dapper for Grandpa. "We are going to be polite. We are going to say please and thank you. And if Aunt Kelsey says something weird, we just smile." "I know, Mom," Evan said, his voice full of that pure, unjaded excitement that only a child possesses on December 24th. "Grandma said she made the cranberry pudding. She promised she'd save the corner piece for me because I got an A in math." That promise, it seemed so small, a corner piece of pudding, but for Evan, whose father had drifted out of the picture years ago, these little anchors of affection from his grandfather and grandmother were vital. He needed to know he belonged. We entered the house, and the heat hit us instantly, a wall of cinnamon scent, expensive perfume, and the low hum of forced conversation. The house was perfect. Not a pine needle was out of place. The tree was a 12-foot monument to my mother's vanity, decorated in strictly coordinated gold and silver ornaments. "Faith," my mother, Diane, said as we walked in. She didn't hug me. She offered her cheek for a quick air kiss, careful not to smudge her makeup. "You're late. We almost started appetizers without you." "We are 5 minutes early." "Mom," I said, checking my watch. "Well, Kelsey has been here for an hour helping," she replied, her eyes already darting past me to critique Evan's hair. "Evan, tuck your shirt in. You look like you just rolled out of bed." I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the old armor sliding into place. "He looks handsome," I said firmly, placing a hand on Evan's shoulder. The evening proceeded with the usual friction. My father, Harold, sat at the head of the table, holding court about the market and his legacy. He loved that word legacy. To Harold Stewart, legacy wasn't about love or memories. It was about assets, influence, and the solidity of his name on buildings. My brother, Marcus, sat across from me, looking tired. Marcus was the peacemaker, the sponge that soaked up the family tension so the rest of us didn't drown. He gave me a small, apologetic smile when my father made a passive-aggressive comment about my little job in the city. Then there was Kelsey, my younger sister, the golden child. She sat to my right, glowing with the confidence of someone who has never been told no without being handed a consolation prize immediately after. Her 2 children were running wild, knocking into furniture, screaming, and being generally chaotic. My parents cooed at them. "High spirits?" My father laughed when Kelsey's son threw a dinner roll at the cat. When Evan had tapped his fork against his glass earlier by accident, my mother had shushed him so loudly the neighbors probably heard it. The double standard was not new. I had lived with it for 35 years. I was the one who left, the one who got divorced, the one who refused to let them control my life with their purse strings. Therefore, I was the outsider. But I endured it for Evan. I wanted him to have cousins. I wanted him to have grandparents. Then came dessert. This was the main event. Diane Stewart prided herself on her holiday spread. There were pies, tarts, and the centerpiece a steaming rich cranberry pudding with warm vanilla sauce. It was the only thing Evan had asked about for 3 days. We moved to the buffet table set up in the living room. The adults were mingling, holding snifters of brandy. Kelsey was feeding her kids off a loaded plate, piling them high with cookies and cake. Her son, who is 8, already had a half-eaten slice of the pudding on his plate and was currently mashing it with his thumb. Evan stood patiently at the end of the line. He was such a good kid. He didn't push. He didn't grab. He waited for the adults to finish serving themselves. Just as I had taught him. I was across the room, talking to Marcus about his new landscaping project, but I kept one eye on my son. I saw him step up to the dessert tray. The dish was empty, save for one generous square of pudding, the corner piece, the one he had been promised. Evan's face lit up. He reached for the serving spoon. Just as his hand hovered over the handle, a manicured hand snatched it away. It was my mother. Diane swooped in, took the spoon, and with a swift, fluid motion, scooped that last piece of pudding onto her own fine china plate. Evan froze. He looked at the empty dish, then up at his grandmother. "Grandma," he whispered, "I thought you said—" Diane paused. She looked down at him. She didn't look apologetic. She didn't realize she had made a mistake. She looked at him with a cold, terrifying amusement. She took a bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. Then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a gatekeeper showing you the lock. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter in the room. "You were too slow. Besides, I made it." "But you promised," Evan said, his voice trembling. He was 10, but in that moment, he looked 5. "And I haven't had any yet." Kelsey, who was standing right there, let out a sharp laugh. "Oh my God, Evan, don't be such a baby. It is just pudding." "He really wanted it, Kelsey," I said, stepping forward. My voice was low, dangerous. "And Mom promised him." Diane turned to me, her eyes flashing with annoyance that I was ruining the mood. She gestured to Kelsey's kids, who were currently stuffing their faces with seconds and thirds. "Look at them," Diane said, pointing to Kelsey's brood. "They ate. They enjoyed it. If Evan is hungry, there are some dry cookies left in the tin." "He's not asking for cookies," I said, feeling the heat rise up my neck. "He's asking for the thing you told him you were saving for him." Diane sighed, a dramatic, long-suffering sound. She looked around the room, gathering an audience. "Faith, stop causing a scene. You are always so dramatic." She looked back down at Evan, who was blinking back tears, trying so hard to be the man I told him to be. Then she said it, the sentence that would burn down our entire relationship. She looked my son in the eye and said, "Evan, you need to learn how the world works. Only family gets to eat." The room went silent for a heartbeat. Then, a few of my father's business friends chuckled. They thought it was a witticism, a joke about survival of the fittest. Kelsey laughed too, a bright, chiming sound that grated on my nerves like broken glass. "Good one, Mom," Kelsey said. "Tough love." I looked at my father. Harold was swirling his brandy, looking bored. He didn't intervene. He didn't say, "Diane, that is cruel." He just watched, as if observing a business negotiation where the weaker party was being crushed. "Only family," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Evan stood there, small and shattered. The tears finally spilled over, hot and fast. He wiped them away furiously with his sleeve. He looked at the empty dish, then at his grandmother, who was already turning away to talk to a neighbor. "I'm not hungry," Evan said. His voice broke on the last word. I felt a physical snap inside my brain. It wasn't a loud explosion. It was the quiet, Metallic click of a door locking forever. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not give them the satisfaction of calling me crazy Faith or emotional Faith. I walked over to Evan. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. Distinct, I said clearly. Go get your coat. Faith, don't be ridiculous, my mother called out. Fork poised halfway to her mouth. We haven't even opened presents. You are going to ruin Christmas because of a piece of cake. I stood up and turned to her. I looked at the woman who gave birth to me, the woman who demanded worship every holiday. I looked at the pudding on her plate. We are leaving, I said. If you walk out that door, my father boomed from his armchair, finally engaging. Don't expect a check for Evan's birthday. It was always about money with them, the leverage, the threat. I didn't answer him. I didn't look at Marcus, who was staring at his shoes, ashamed but silent. I didn't look at Kelsey, who was rolling her eyes. I walked to the closet, grabbed our coats, and helped Evan into his puffer jacket. I zipped it up to his chin. I put my hand on his back. Merry Christmas, I said to the room. It was the coldest thing I've ever said in my life. We walked out into the biting Wisconsin winter air. The snow was falling in thick, silent flakes. The door clicked shut behind us, muffling the sound of the party, the laughter, and the warmth that was never really warm. The car ride back to Milwaukee was agonizing. The silence was heavy, thick with the things I couldn't say because I was the mother, and I had to be the strong one. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The windshield wipers swished back and forth, a rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of my restraint. I glanced at Evan in the passenger seat. He was staring out the window at the passing streetlights. He wasn't crying anymore, which was worse. He was thinking, I'm sorry, Evan, I said, my voice tight. I am so sorry. He didn't answer immediately. We arrived at our duplex 20 minutes later. It was dark, but as we walked in, I turned on the string lights I had hung around the living room window. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. It smelled like lavender and old books, not judgment and pine. Go put your pajamas on, I told him, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. I am going to make us the Special Reserve. The Special Reserve was our code for the expensive hot cocoa mix I bought from a local chocolatier, topped with an obscene amount of whipped cream and crushed peppermint. It was better than any dry pudding Diane Stewart could ever bake. I went into the kitchen, my hands shaking as I poured the milk. I was vibrating with rage. The image of her face, that smug, gatekeeping smile, was burned into my retinas. Only family gets to eat. It wasn't a joke. It was a statement of fact. In her mind, we were not family. We were accessories. We were tolerated guests. And the moment we wanted something she wanted, our status was revoked. I whipped the cream until my arm ached. I needed to hit something, but the cream had to suffice. I carried 2 steaming mugs into the living room. Evan was sitting on the couch, hugging his knees. He looked so small in the soft glow of the tree lights. I handed him the mug. Here, careful. It is hot. He took it with both hands. He blew on the steam. He took a sip, and I saw a little bit of tension leave his shoulders. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were wide and devastatingly sincere. Mom, he asked. Yeah, Bud. Are we not family? The question hit me harder than the cold wind outside. It wasn't an accusatory question. It was a clarifying one. He was trying to understand the rules of the game he had just been forced to play. I sat down next to him and pulled him into my side. I wrapped my arm around him, burying my nose in his hair. He smelled like cold air and boy shampoo. Evan, look at me, I said. He looked up. Family, I said, choosing my words with the precision of the risk analyst I was, is not about who has the same last name. It is not about who lives in the big house, and it is certainly not about who gets the last piece of pudding. Then what is it? He asked. Family is where you are respected, I said fiercely. Family is the people who make sure you are fed. Family is the people who would never, ever make you feel small just to make themselves feel big. You and me. We are family. Marcus's family. But what happened back there, that wasn't family. That was just people we are related to. He nodded slowly, processing this. Okay, he whispered. I like our family better. Me too, I said. I held him until he finished his cocoa. I held him until his breathing evened out and he fell asleep against my shoulder. But as I sat there in the quiet of my living room, watching the snow pile up against the window pane, my mind was not peaceful. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My mother had said, "Only family gets to eat." She thought she was teaching him a lesson about hierarchy. She thought she was putting me in my place. She thought she could starve us of affection and respect, and we would come crawling back for crumbs because we needed them. But she had made a fatal miscalculation. I looked around my apartment. I thought about the paperwork I had in my safe deposit box, documents I hadn't looked at in years because I trusted them. I thought about the cabin in Bayfield. I thought about the LLC structure my father had set up 5 years ago to protect the assets. I remembered the stack of papers they had shoved in front of me during the divorce, urging me to sign so things would be easier. I remembered signing them, but I also remembered reading them. I always read the fine print. That was my job. And as I replayed the evening in my head, the cruelty, the dismissal, the sheer arrogance of their power, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't about a piece of cake anymore. If only family gets to eat, and they had just decided I wasn't family, then they had better hope they didn't need a signature from a stranger to keep their kingdom intact. My phone sat on the coffee table, silent for now, but I knew tomorrow it would ring. They would expect the apology tour. They would expect me to call and beg for forgiveness for ruining Christmas. I took a sip of my cocoa. It was sweet, hot, and satisfying. Let them eat cake, I thought. I am going to eat their legacy. The morning sun hit my bedroom blinds at 7 o'clock, slicing through the room in thin, dusty beams. For a split second, between the warmth of the duvet and the waking world, I forgot. I forgot the cranberry pudding. I forgot the look on my son's face. I forgot that I had walked out of my parents' house on Christmas Eve and effectively detonated a nuclear warhead in the middle of the living room. Then my phone vibrated against the nightstand wood. It was a long, angry buzz that sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I rolled over and picked it up. My screen was a wall of notifications. 33 missed calls. 33. I stared at the number, blinking the sleep from my eyes. Who calls someone 33 times between midnight and 7 in the morning on Christmas Day? A worried mother? A grieving parent? No, a panic-stricken asset manager. The calls were all from Mom. There were also 14 text messages, but the preview lines were not visible because I keep my notifications private. I unlocked the phone, my thumb hovering over the voicemail icon. I knew I should not listen to it. I knew it would be poison. But the analyst in me needed the data. I needed to know the blast radius. I pressed play on the most recent voicemail, left at 6:45 in the morning. Faith, pick up the phone. My mother's voice did not sound like the matriarch of Brookfield. It sounded shrill, jagged, and breathless. We need to talk right now. Your father is on the other line with the attorneys. They are saying the bank is sealing everything by noon tomorrow because of the holiday freeze. We need your signature on the transfer documents immediately. Do not play games with us. Faith, this involves the retirement accounts. Call me back. Now. Click. I sat up in bed, the cold air hitting my bare shoulders. I replayed the message in my head. Retirement accounts. Bank sealing everything. Lawyers. There was not a single syllable about Evan. Not one word of "I am sorry," not even a fake "we are worried about you driving in the snow." It was entirely transactional. I scrolled through the other voicemails. They followed a similar trajectory. The first few from last night were angry, "How dare you leave?" The ones from 2 in the morning were bargaining, "Just come back and we can discuss the trust." The ones from this morning were pure, unadulterated panic. They were not calling because they missed their daughter. They were calling because they had realized something terrifying in the hours after I left. They realized that when I walked out the door, I took my legal standing with me. I swung my legs out of bed and walked to the window. The street below was buried in fresh white snow, silent and pristine. It was the kind of morning where families sat in pajamas, drank cocoa, and opened gifts. Down the hall, I could hear Evan stirring. I did not want him to see me shaking, and I was shaking not from fear, but from a sudden, blinding rage. 33 calls to save their money, 0 calls to save their relationship with their grandson. I opened my text messages. I typed out a reply to Diane Stewart. I kept it surgical. I wanted no room for misinterpretation. Last night, you looked my 10-year-old son in the eye and told him he was not family. You made it clear that family is a privilege he does not qualify for. If we are not family at the dinner table, then do not call me when you need a signature for the family assets. Do not contact me again. I hit send. Then, before the inevitable incoming call could light up my screen, I went into the settings. I found her contact card. I scrolled to the bottom. I tapped block caller. I did the same for my father. I put the phone down on the dresser. It felt heavy, like a brick of lead. I took a deep breath, fixed my face into a smile, and went to wake up my son. For the next 2 hours, I pretended everything was normal. We made pancakes. We opened the few gifts I had managed to buy on my single salary: a new Lego set, a science kit, a couple of graphic novels. Evan was happy, or at least he was acting happy for my sake. He is perceptive. He knew the phone on the dresser was a loaded gun. At 10 o'clock, the phone lit up again. It was Marcus. I stared at the screen. Marcus, the peacekeeper. Marcus, the man who had spent his entire adult life trying to bridge the gap between my parents' narcissism and my reality. If he was calling, it meant they had sent him. He was the negotiator sent in when the initial assault failed. I almost didn't answer. But Marcus had looked tired last night. He had looked defeated. I picked up the phone and walked into the bathroom, closing the door and turning on the exhaust fan so Evan wouldn't hear. "Merry Christmas, Marcus," I said. My voice was flat. "Faith," Marcus said. He didn't say Merry Christmas. He sounded like he was calling from inside a bunker while bombs were falling. "Are you okay?" "I am making pancakes," I said. "We are fine. Better than fine. Actually, no one is actively insulting my child here." "Listen," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I am not calling to tell you to come back. I want you to know that this surprised me." "Okay. It is a madhouse over here. Faith, I have never seen Dad like this. He has been on the phone with 3 different partners from his firm since 6 in the morning. On Christmas, I asked. That costs double the hourly rate." "He doesn't care," Marcus said. "He is scared. Mom is crying in the kitchen. But it is not the sad crying. It is the angry crying. She keeps saying you are ungrateful, that you are trying to sabotage their future." "I am not doing anything," I said, leaning against the cold tile of the bathroom wall. "I am literally just eating breakfast. They are the ones spiraling." "They keep saying this phrase," Marcus said, and I could hear the rustle of movement, as if he was pacing or hiding in a closet. "Dad keeps yelling about protecting the deserving. He told the lawyer that he wants to restructure the LLC immediately. He said, if she is a traitor, she loses her share. He is trying to push through a vote to remove you as a signatory on the Bayfield properties." My ears perked up. Bayfield. The cabin. It was a beautiful property on Lake Superior. Bought years ago. It was supposed to be the family retreat. My father had put it into an LLC Stewart Heritage Holdings for liability reasons, or so he said. "He can't remove me," I said, my analyst brain kicking into gear. "Not without my consent. That operating agreement requires a unanimous vote for structural changes. I remember reading it when I signed it 5 years ago." "That is what the lawyer told him," Marcus said. "That is why they are panicking. They need you to sign a waiver. They sent you an email this morning, disguised as a holiday update, but it is actually a rush request for a digital signature on a modification doc." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "They think I am stupid. They think I will just click sign because I'm afraid of them." They are desperate. Faith, why are they so desperate about the cabin right now? It is just a vacation house. We hardly go there in the winter. It is never just a vacation house with Dad, I said. It is an asset, and if they are rushing to seal something before the end of the year, it means that asset is leveraged. There was a silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of shouting in the background on Marcus's end, my father's booming baritone. Faith, Marcus said, I heard what you texted Mom. Good. You said, if I am not family at the table, I am not family on paper. I meant it. They are going to come for you, Marcus warned. Dad is talking about scorched earth. He said if you don't sign by tomorrow, he's going to sue you for breach of fiduciary duty or something. He is making stuff up. Let him try, I said. I have done nothing wrong. I just refuse to be abused. That is not a crime. Marcus was quiet for a long time. The background shouting got louder, then muffled again. When he spoke next, his voice was different. The hesitation was gone. What do you want me to do? I froze. What? I am sick of this. Faith, Marcus said. I watched him scream at Mom because she didn't get your signature fast enough. I watched Kelsey sit there and feed off it, telling them you were always jealous. I looked at that empty spot where Evan was standing yesterday. I am done keeping the peace. There is no peace here to keep. I felt a lump form in my throat. For 35 years, Marcus had been Switzerland, neutral, safe, complicit. You don't have to do anything. Marcus, this is my fight. No, he said firmly. You are my sister. Evan is my nephew. He's a good kid. He didn't deserve that. So, tell me, do you want me to sign their papers? Do you want me to stall? Tell me what to do. My mind raced. Having Marcus on the inside was an advantage I hadn't calculated. If he was willing to be a double agent, or at least a conscientious objector, the board had changed. Don't sign anything, I told him. If they hand you a paper, tell them you need to have your own counsel review it. That will buy us time. And Marcus, yeah. Find out why they are sealing it. Find out what the deadline actually is. Is it a tax deadline, or is it a debt deadline? If Dad is selling the cabin, or refinancing it, he needs all members to sign. If he has already promised the bank he can deliver the signatures, and I refuse, then he is in breach of contract, Marcus finished the thought, and the deal collapses. Exactly. I will find out, Marcus said. I have to go. Kelsey is coming down the hall. He hung up. I lowered the phone. My hand was trembling again, but this time it was with adrenaline. I walked out of the bathroom and looked at my son, who was building a Lego spaceship on the carpet. He looked up and smiled. Who was that? Uncle Marcus, I said. He says Merry Christmas. Is he coming over? No, honey, he is busy. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a second cup of coffee. I stood by the counter, staring at the snow piling up against the back door. The 33 calls made sense now. The voicemail made sense. My parents were not panicking because I had ruined Christmas. They did not care about the holiday spirit. They were panicking because they had made a deal with the devil, or a bank assuming I was a silent, obedient piece of furniture. They assumed I would always be there to rubber stamp their schemes because I craved their approval. But by starving my son of affection, they had inadvertently starved themselves of the one thing they needed to survive my compliance. They were terrified, and they should be, because they weren't just dealing with a hurt daughter anymore. They were dealing with a minority shareholder who had just realized she held the veto power. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter. You want a war, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Okay, let's see who freezes first. The digital erasure began exactly 4 hours after I blocked their numbers. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by the carnage of wrapping paper and Lego bricks, trying to build a Star Wars ship with Evan. It was a peaceful moment, the kind of quiet intimacy I had fought to preserve. Then, my iPad lit up on the coffee table. It was a notification from Facebook. Diane Stewart added a new photo. I knew I should not look. I knew it was bait. But the curiosity of a woman who had just declared war got the better of me. I swiped the screen open. The photo was a masterpiece of staging. It was taken in front of the 12-foot tree in their living room. My father sat in his leather armchair, looking regal and benevolent, a glass of brandy in hand. My mother stood behind him, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder, wearing a smile that looked painted on. Kelsey was there, front and center, with her husband and her 2 children. They looked like a catalog advertisement for the perfect upper-middle-class American family. The lighting was warm, the composition was balanced, and the caption was brief. Blessed for family. Merry Christmas from the Stewarts. There was no mention of the empty space where Evan and I should have been. There was no missing faith in Evan. There was just a seamless, terrifying revision of reality. To anyone scrolling past, we did not exist. We had been cropped out of the narrative. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't jealousy. I did not want to be in that picture. It was the public declaration of their truth. We are the family. Everyone else is irrelevant. As if on cue. A text message popped up on the iPad. Since I had blocked them on my phone, they were trying other avenues. It was Kelsey. Why did you leave like that? Mom is crying. She says Evan was being difficult and you overreacted. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the glass. Evan was being difficult. They were already spinning the story. In their version, the 10-year-old boy who quietly asked for a promised piece of pudding was the aggressor, and the grandmother who denied him food was the victim. I typed back, my thumbs moving fast. Mom looked my son in the eye and said, "Only family gets to eat." That is not him being difficult. That is emotional cruelty. Kelsey's reply came 3 bubbles later, fast and dismissive. Oh my God. Faith, it was a joke. You are so sensitive. You always take things the wrong way. Mom was just stressed about the party. You made a huge scene for nothing. I read the words joke and sensitive and felt a sudden, clinical detachment. This was the mechanism. This was how they survived. To Kelsey, the golden child, every instance of abuse was just a singular, isolated joke that didn't land. She refused to see the timeline. She refused to connect the dots because if she did, she would have to admit that the pedestal she stood on was built on my back. To her, a stab wound was just a scratch. To me, it was the 1,000th cut in the same scar tissue. It is not a joke to Evan. I wrote back, and I am done laughing. I set the iPad to Do Not Disturb and flipped it face down. Mom, look, Evan said, holding up a gray Lego wing. I finished the starboard engine. That is amazing, buddy, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. You are a master engineer. But while he built his spaceship, I started building my case. I went to my home office and pulled out a fresh legal pad. I am a risk analyst. I survive by tracking patterns. If they wanted to pretend none of this happened, I would write it down in ink. I started listing the exclusions. Item 1, Evan's 6th birthday. My parents forgot to call until 3 days later because they were golfing in Arizona. They sent a check for $50 signed by his secretary. Item 2. The co-signing incident, 4 years ago. My father needed a family signature to secure a loan for a commercial property because his debt-to-income ratio was too high on his own. He pressured me for weeks, saying it was for the family legacy. I signed. I never saw a dime of the profit, but my credit score took a hit when he made 2 late payments. Item 3. The house deed. When I bought my duplex, my mother suggested heavily that I put the house in a trust controlled by them for tax purposes. She said it was convenient. I had refused, and she gave me the silent treatment for a month. I wrote until my hand cramped. The page was full of small betrayals, financial manipulations, and emotional neglect. It wasn't a list of grievances. It was a dossier of systemic exploitation. And then, my pen hovered over the last entry, the Bayfield cabin. I circled it 3 times. My phone buzzed again. I had blocked the family. But I hadn't blocked Marcus's personal cell. Meet me at the Grind on 3rd Street. 1 hour. Come alone. The Grind was a coffee shop in the Warehouse District, miles away from the country clubs of Brookfield. It was loud. smelled of burnt beans, and had zero ambiance. It was neutral ground. I left Evan with my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet retired librarian who actually liked children, and drove downtown. Marcus was already there, sitting in a booth in the back corner. He looked terrible. My brother is a handsome man, usually polished to perfection, but today he looked like he had aged 5 years overnight. He was wearing a wrinkled hoodie, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He was staring into a black coffee as if it held the secrets of the universe. I slid into the booth opposite him. "You look like hell." "Happy holidays to you too, Faith," he said, his voice raspy. He pushed a manila folder across the sticky table toward me. "What is this?" I asked, not touching it yet. "Evidence," he said. "Or maybe it is ammunition. I don't know anymore." I opened the folder. It was a copy of the operating agreement for Stewart Heritage Holdings, LLC. "I know this," I said, scanning the first page. "Dad set this up 5 years ago to hold the cabin and the lakefront property. He said it was for liability protection." "Read the member list, Faith," Marcus said, rubbing his temples. I turned to page 4. Managing member Harold Stewart, 40% interest. Member Diane Stewart, 30% interest. Member Marcus Stewart, 15% interest. Member Faith Stewart, 15% interest. "I know I am a member," I said. I signed the papers. "Do you remember why you are a member?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "Do you remember how that happened?" I frowned, casting my mind back to the blur of life right after my divorce. I had been vulnerable, scared, and trying to rebuild my finances. Dad said he wanted to include me. He said it was his way of making sure I had assets for Evan. Marcus let out a short, bitter laugh. "Faith, you are the smartest person I know. But sometimes you are blind when it comes to them. Dad didn't give you 15% out of the goodness of his heart. Think back, the summer of 2020. The roof on the cabin collapsed. The dock was washed away by the storm. The memory hit me like a physical slap. I had just received my divorce settlement. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a nest egg. My father had called me, frantic. He said he was liquidity poor at the moment because all his cash was tied up in a development deal. He said the cabin was going to be condemned if they didn't fix the roof immediately. "I gave him money," I whispered. "I wrote a check for $15,000. "Correction," Marcus said. "You made a capital contribution. That $15,000 wasn't a loan." "Faith, it was a buy-in. Dad didn't want to pay taxes on a gift, and he didn't want to owe you a debt. So he had the lawyers draft this up. He sold you 15% of the LLC in exchange for the repair money. He made it sound like he was doing you a favor by letting you in on the family trust." I stared at the paper. I had paid for my own inheritance. I had paid to fix a roof I was barely allowed to sleep under. "Okay," I said, my voice hardening. "So I own 15%? So what? Why are they panicking now? Why the 33 calls?" Marcus looked around the coffee shop to make sure no one was listening. "Because Dad is broke. Faith." The world stopped spinning for a second. "What? Not broke, Marcus clarified. "He still has the house and the cars and the appearance of wealth, but he is cash poor. He made a massive leverage bet on a commercial complex in downtown Milwaukee 6 months ago, and the anchor tenant pulled out. He is bleeding cash. The bank is calling in the loan covenants." I sat back, the puzzle pieces clicking into place with a satisfying, terrifying snap. "He needs to refinance the cabin," I said. "It is the only unencumbered asset he has left with significant equity." "Exactly," Marcus said. "He has a deal lined up with a private equity group to do a sale-leaseback on the cabin property. It would inject $200,000 of liquidity into his accounts immediately, but there is a catch." "The operating agreement," I said, tapping the document. "Section 8, paragraph 3. Marcus recited from memory. "Any sale, mortgage, encumbrance, or refinancing of the primary assets requires the unanimous written consent of all members." I looked down at the document. Unanimous. He needs my signature, I said softly. He needs it by December 31st, Marcus said. The bank gave him a deadline. If he doesn't show proof of the refinance or the sale by the end of the year, they trigger a default on his commercial loans. His interest rates will triple. He could lose the Brookfield house. I felt a chill run down my spine. The sealing everything voicemail wasn't a threat to lock me out. It was a panic response because I had locked them out. By refusing to answer the phone, I was effectively holding a match to my father's financial empire. Does Kelsey know? I asked. Kelsey knows Daddy is stressed, Marcus said scathingly. She doesn't know the details. She just knows that if Dad loses money, her allowance dries up. That is why she is texting you to apologize. She is protecting her supply. And you? I asked him. Why are you telling me this? If I don't sign, you lose your inheritance too. Marcus looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. Faith, do you know what Dad said to me when you left last night? He didn't ask if you were okay driving in the snow. He looked at me and said, "Get that bitch back here or you are out of the will." I flinched. He called you a bitch, Marcus said, his voice shaking. And I realized I am 40 years old, and I am still terrified of him. I am done. Faith, I have my own job. I have my own life. I don't need his money, but I do need my self-respect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a flash drive. He slid it across the table. What is this? Emails, Marcus said. Between Dad and the lawyer, they discuss how to pressure you. They discuss the fact that you don't understand business and will sign whatever we put in front of her if we make her feel guilty enough. There is also a draft of a document they were going to give you at the party. Let me guess, I said. A transfer of power. A waiver, Marcus corrected. Assigning your voting rights to Dad for administrative convenience. If you had eaten that pudding and stayed for presents, they would have served it to you with the eggnog. I picked up the flash drive. It felt cold and hard in my hand. Thank you, Marcus, I said. Don't thank me yet, he said, standing up. You hold the cards, Faith, but they are going to come for you. They are going to use everything. Evan, the past, your divorce. They will use it all to get that signature. Let them come, I said. I watched my brother walk out of the coffee shop, shoulders slumped, heading back to the war zone. I stayed in the booth for another 20 minutes, staring at the operating agreement. Unanimous consent. My mother had told Evan, "Only family gets to eat." She had drawn a circle and pushed us out, but she had forgotten that I had paid for the ground she was standing on. I picked up my phone. I didn't unblock them. Instead, I opened my email app. I composed a new message to my personal attorney, a sharp-witted woman named Sarah, who had handled my divorce. Subject, Stewart Heritage Holdings. Emergency review. Sarah, I need you to review the attached operating agreement. I believe I am the blocking vote on a major transaction. I need to know exactly how to freeze this asset so tight that air cannot get in or out. I want a full forensic accounting of the last 5 years. If they want my signature, they are going to have to explain every single penny they spent. I hit send. The sealing they threatened was real, but they had the direction wrong. I wasn't being sealed out. I was sealing them in. The day after Christmas is usually reserved for returning ill-fitting sweaters and eating leftovers. For me, it became the day I stopped being a daughter and started being a litigant. The silence in my house was heavy, broken only by the sound of Evan watching cartoons in the living room. I was in the kitchen, staring at my laptop, waiting. Marcus had texted me earlier that morning. He had gone to see a friend of his from college, a guy named David who specialized in corporate litigation. Marcus's text was short, but it vibrated with a kind of terrified clarity. David says if they are scared of you asking questions, then you need to ask every single question you can think of. He says silence is their shield. Break it. At 10 in the morning, the first salvo arrived. It was an email. The sender was Arthur Vance, my father's longtime attorney. I knew Arthur. He had been at my wedding. He had sent Evan a silver rattle when he was born. He was a man who smelled of expensive scotch and old leather. the kind of man who smiled with his mouth but never his eyes. The subject line read, Urgent Time-Sensitive Tax. Implications for Stewart. Heritage Holdings. I opened it, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt entirely too fast for a woman sitting at her own kitchen table. Dear Faith, I hope you and Evan had a wonderful Christmas. Your father asked me to reach out regarding a pressing administrative matter concerning the Bayfield property. As you know, the current fiscal year is closing, and there are significant tax liabilities that will affect all members of the LLC if we do not restructure the asset holdings before December 31st. To protect your interest and avoid unnecessary financial exposure for you personally, we have prepared the attached waiver and consent form. This will allow Harold to manage the necessary filings on your behalf. Please sign and return by 5 this afternoon to ensure the family is protected. We are acting in the best interest of the family. As always, warmly, Arthur. It was a masterclass in manipulation. It was polite. It was paternal. And it was terrifying. It used words like liability and exposure to trigger the primal fear of anyone who lives paycheck to paycheck. It suggested that if I did not sign, I would be the one owing the IRS money. It framed my compliance as self-preservation. A younger version of me would have panicked. A younger version of me would have thought, oh no, I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to owe taxes, and I would have signed just to make the fear go away. But I wasn't that version anymore. I was the woman who had seen her son denied dessert. I forwarded the email immediately to Sarah, my attorney. I added a single line of text. Is this a tax issue, or is this a threat? Sarah called me 10 minutes later. She did not waste time with pleasantries. Faith, are you sitting down? Yes, I said, gripping my coffee mug. This is not a tax issue, Sarah said, her voice crisp and professional. I mean, technically, taxes are involved in everything, but this specific threat, it is smoke. They are claiming that restructuring is needed to avoid liability. But I pulled the LLC's filing history. They haven't changed their tax election in 5 years. There is no sudden IRS deadline that pops up on December 26th unless they are trying to hide income or move an asset before the ball drops. So they are lying, I said. They are omitting, Sarah corrected. Arthur is careful. He didn't say there is a tax penalty. He said there are liabilities if they don't restructure. That could mean anything. It could mean your father promised a buyer he would close the deal in this tax year to save himself capital gains tax. If he misses the window, he pays more, but he is framing it as you paying more. Gaslighting, I whispered. Legal gaslighting, Sarah agreed. And look at the timestamp on the attachment. He wants it back by 5 o'clock today. Faith, no legitimate lawyer demands a signature on a complex restructuring document with a 6-hour deadline on a federal holiday weekend unless they are desperate to prevent you from reading it. I looked out the window. The snow was still falling, covering the driveway I had shoveled yesterday. Marcus told me Dad has a liquidity problem. He thinks there is a sale-leaseback deal on the table. That tracks, Sarah said. And I found something else. I did a quick search on the County Register of Deeds for Bayfield. There was a notice of intent filed 3 weeks ago regarding a survey of the land boundaries. The applicant wasn't the LLC. It was a company called North Star Development Group. I felt the blood drain from my face. Who are they? They are a commercial developer, Sarah said. Faith, your father hasn't just negotiated a deal. He has likely already signed a preliminary agreement. He is selling the ground out from under the cabin. He probably promised them he had total control of the LLC. If he can't deliver your signature, he is in breach of contract with North Star. The audacity of it took my breath away. He had sold something he didn't fully own, assuming I was nothing more than a ghost in the machine. What do we do? I asked. We don't defend, Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. We attack. We shift the burden of proof. You are not a daughter right now. Faith, you are a 15% owner of a company that is being mismanaged. You have rights, statutory rights. Tell me what to write, I said. I want to send the reply myself. Good, Sarah said. Here is the strategy. We deny the request. We freeze the asset. And we demand the one thing they are terrified of giving you. The books, I said. The books, Sarah confirmed. Full forensic accounting. Every receipt, every transfer, every check written from that LLC for the last 5 years. If they are claiming financial exposure, you have the right to see exactly where the money went. I spent the next hour drafting the email. I deleted and rewrote sentences, stripping away any emotion. I removed the word dad. I removed the word mom. I removed I feel. I replaced them with the undersigned and managing member. When I was finished, I read it aloud to the empty kitchen, to Arthur Vance, C.C. Harold Stewart, Diane Stewart, Marcus Stewart, regarding refusal of consent and demand for inspection. Mr. Vance, I am in receipt of your request for my signature on the restructuring waiver. Please be advised that I do not consent to any sale, mortgage, lease, encumbrance, or restructuring of the assets held by Stewart Heritage Holdings, LLC. Furthermore, as a 15% stakeholder, I have reason to believe that the managing member has entered into preliminary negotiations with third parties, specifically North Star Development Group, without the unanimous consent required by Article 8 of our operating agreement. Any such agreement is unauthorized and void, effective immediately. I am exercising my right under Wisconsin Statute 183 to inspect the books and records of the company. I demand a full accounting of all financial transactions, bank statements, and tax returns for the LLC from 2020 to the present day. I expect these records to be delivered to my counsel within 10 business days. If any assets are transferred or altered before this inspection is complete, I will file for an immediate injunction and seek damages for breach of fiduciary duty. Govern yourself accordingly. Faith Stewart. My finger hovered over the enter key. This was it. This wasn't just saying no to dessert. This was saying no to the entire structure of my family's power dynamic. This was telling my father, the man who believed he was God, that he was just a man who had broken a contract. I thought of Evan's face when he asked, "Are we not family?" I thought of the 33 calls. I pressed send. The sound of the email swooshing away was anticlimactic. There was no explosion. The roof didn't cave in. The lights didn't flicker. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. Then, I stood up. I walked over to the sink. There were breakfast dishes soaking in the soapy water plates with syrup residue, a coffee mug, a fork. I picked up the sponge and started to wash the dishes. It was such a mundane action. Scrub, rinse, dry, scrub, rinse, dry. But as I stood there, feeling the warm water on my hands, I felt a strange, alien sensation blooming in my chest. For 35 years, I had believed that power was something my father held and dispensed in small doses when we were good. I believed power was money. I believed power was a loud voice and a seat at the head of the table. But I realize now, as I scrubbed a patch of dried syrup off a plate, that power was simply the ability to say no and mean it. I had the power. I had always had the power. My signature was the key to their kingdom, and I had spent my whole life begging them to let me hold it, not realizing I was the one locking the door. They weren't angry because I was weak. They were angry because I was strong, and they had spent decades trying to make me forget it. I finished the dishes. I dried my hands on a towel. The house was quiet, peaceful, safe. Then, my phone buzzed on the counter. I looked at it. It wasn't a call. It was a voicemail notification. They must have called while I was writing the email, and the block feature had sent it straight to the recording. I hesitated. I didn't want to break the peace, but I needed to know the reaction. The email would have landed in Arthur's inbox 5 minutes ago. He would have called my father immediately. I pressed play. Faith. It was my mother. She wasn't screaming this time. She was sobbing. It was a wet, jagged sound. The sound of a woman who has lost control of her world. Faith, how could you do this? She wept. Arthur just called your father. He says you are asking for the records. Faith, you are going to ruin us. Your father, his heart can't take this stress. This was supposed to be our retirement. That money was for the family. Why are you so hateful? We gave you life. We gave you everything. And you send a letter like that." I listened, waiting. I waited for her to say, "I am sorry I hurt Evan." I waited for her to say, "We shouldn't have excluded you." I waited for her to ask, "Why are you doing this?" in a way that sought understanding, not guilt, but she didn't. "You need to withdraw it," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Call Arthur and withdraw it. Please, Faith, don't be this person. Only family gets to eat. Don't you understand? You are starving us." The irony was so thick I could taste it. She was using the very weapon she had used against my son, the threat of starvation, to beg for her own feast. She didn't care about the accounting because it was extra paperwork. She cared because she knew what I would find. She was terrified of the truth. "If you don't fix this," she sobbed, "don't ever come back." The message ended. I looked at the phone. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt justified. She was crying about retirement accounts and stress. She wasn't crying about the fact that she had alienated her daughter and grandson. She was mourning the loss of her control, not the loss of our love. I deleted the voicemail. "Mom." I turned around. Evan was standing in the doorway, holding his new science kit. "Can we make the volcano now?" I smiled at him. It was a real smile, one that reached my eyes. "Yes," I said. "Let's make a volcano. Let's make a big one." I walked over to him, leaving the phone on the counter. The war was raging outside, and I had just launched a missile that would decimate their defenses. But in here, in this house, the only thing that mattered was a little boy and his vinegar and baking soda explosion. I was done being their daughter. I was Evan's mother, and nobody was going to eat until he was full. The silence from Brookfield lasted exactly 24 hours. After my email demanding the financial records, I expected them to regroup, to consult with Arthur Vance, and perhaps to come back with a polished legal rebuttal. I did not expect them to double down on the cruelty. It started with a notification on my phone Tuesday morning. I had blocked their calls, but I had left the text channels open, mostly because my lawyer, Sarah, advised me to keep a record of everything they said. "Let them dig their own grave," she had said. "Every text is a shovel." The message was from my mother, Diane. "Faith, I am praying for you. I know you are lashing out because you are hurting, but trying to destroy your father's legacy won't fix what is broken inside you. Evan needs to learn respect. The world does not revolve around him. You are too soft with him, and that is why he is so fragile. If you had disciplined him properly, he wouldn't have cried over a dessert. You are raising him to be weak, just like you are being right now." I read the message 3 times. The first time, I felt the old, familiar sting, the childhood trigger that made me want to apologize just to make the criticism stop. The second time, I felt nausea. The third time, I felt a coldness settle over my skin that had nothing to do with the Wisconsin winter. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even denying the event. She was justifying it. She was reframing the abuse of a 10-year-old boy as a necessary lesson in respect, and she was weaponizing my parenting against me. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot. I saved it to a folder on my cloud drive labeled Evidence. Then, I forwarded the image to Marcus. "Look at what she just sent me." I typed. Marcus called me less than 30 seconds later. "Did she really say that?" he asked. There was no fatigue in his voice today. There was something else, a sharp, vibrating anger that I had never heard from my brother before. "Verbatim," I said, putting the phone on speaker so I could continue sorting through my mail. "She thinks she is helping. She thinks she is the matriarch dispensing wisdom." "She is delusional," Marcus spat. "Faith, I am sitting in the kitchen right now." "They are not praying for you. They are terrified. Dad is screaming at Arthur on the phone. They know they can't produce those records you asked for." "Why?" I asked. "What is in them?" "I don't know the specifics," Marcus said, lowering his voice. "But I heard Dad say, If she sees the ledger for 2023, we are dead. And then Mom sent you that text. They are trying to break you emotionally so you withdraw the demand. It is not going to work, I said. In fact, it just makes me want to see those ledgers more. Good, Marcus said, because I am done making excuses for them. You know what Dad said when he read your email? He didn't say, "Maybe we should talk to her." He said, "She is ungrateful trash." He talked about you like you were an employee he wanted to fire, not his daughter. I am an employee to him, I said. I am the employee who holds the password to the safe. Just then, another text popped up. This one was from Kelsey. Mom showed me your email. I can't believe you are suing the family. You are just jealous because Dad trusts me with the estate planning and he keeps you in the dark. Grow up, Faith. Stop trying to ruin everything just because you are bitter about your divorce. I read it aloud to Marcus. Marcus sighed. A heavy, exhausted sound. They are feeding her scraps. Faith, Dad told Kelsey that if the restructuring goes through, he will put her in charge of the cabin's rental income. She thinks she is being promoted. She doesn't realize she is being used as a shield. She says I am jealous, I said, looking at the text. She has no idea I am trying to save the asset she thinks she's going to inherit. Don't tell her, Marcus said. She won't believe you. She is drinking the Kool-Aid by the gallon. Just be careful. Faith, they are getting desperate. I am not afraid of them, Marcus. You should be, he said darkly. Desperate people do irrational things. An hour later, I found out exactly why they were so desperate. My lawyer, Sarah, requested a video call. When her face appeared on my laptop screen, she looked like a hunter who had just trapped a very large, very dangerous animal. Faith, she said, skipping the pleasantries. We found it. Found what? The reason for the deadline, the reason for the 33 calls, the reason they are terrified of your inspection demand. She shared her screen. It was a complex document with the header of a bank I recognized, First Wisconsin Commercial. Your father isn't just selling the land under the cabin, Sarah explained, using her cursor to highlight a paragraph. He is trying to execute a cross-collateralized refinance. Do you know what that is? I am a risk analyst, I said. It means he is using one asset to secure debt on another. Exactly, Sarah said. And it is worse than we thought. Harold took out a massive bridge loan 18 months ago to invest in a tech park development outside of Madison. It was a high-risk venture. The development stalled. The bridge loan is maturing on December 31st. I stared at the numbers. They were staggering. If he doesn't pay it back, I asked. He defaults, Sarah said, and the penalties are severe. But here's the kicker. The bank agreed to convert the bridge loan into a long-term mortgage. If and only if he could put up additional collateral, he offered them the Bayfield cabin. He put up the family cabin to save a failed tech park investment, I said, feeling the anger burn hot in my chest. Yes, Sarah said, but the bank did their due diligence. They saw the operating agreement. They saw that the cabin is owned by Stewart Heritage Holdings, LLC, and they saw that you own 15%. They told him they cannot accept the cabin as collateral without a signed resolution from all members agreeing to encumber the property. So that is what the restructuring waiver was. I realized it wasn't about taxes. It was a permission slip for him to gamble my inheritance to cover his losses. Correct, Sarah said. And if he doesn't get your signature by the 31st, the refinance falls through. The bridge loan defaults. The bank will seize his commercial assets, and they might come after his personal liquidity to satisfy the debt. He is looking at financial ruin. Faith. He lied to me, I whispered. He told me it was for the best interest of the family. He told me it was tax liability. He lied because he knew you would say no, Sarah said. He knew that if you saw the books, you would see that the LLC has been draining cash to pay the interest on his other loans. He has been commingling funds. Faith. That is why he is scared of the accounting. He has been using the cabin's maintenance fund as his personal piggy bank to keep his other sinking ships afloat. I sat back in my chair. The magnitude of the betrayal was breathtaking. 33 calls, I said softly. He wasn't calling to apologize to Evan. He was calling because the bank was breathing down his neck. I am not a daughter to him. I am a compliance hurdle. And right now, Sarah said, her voice grim, you are the hurdle that is 10 feet tall and made of concrete. What happens now? I asked. Now, we wait, Sarah said. We have the upper hand. We have demanded the accounting. He can't produce it without incriminating himself. He can't get the loan without your signature. He is cornered. He will fight, I said. He won't just roll over. No, Sarah agreed. He won't. And that brings me to the other thing I need to tell you. I have a contact at the clerk of courts. They haven't filed anything yet. But word gets around. What word? Your father is telling people, his partners, the bank, anyone who will listen, that the reason he can't get the signature is because you are mentally unstable. The air left the room. What? He is spinning a narrative, Sarah said gently. He is saying that you had a breakdown after your divorce, that you are vindictive and irrational. He is trying to lay the groundwork to petition a judge for an emergency order to bypass your signature, claiming you are acting in bad faith to harm the company. He is calling me crazy, I said, my voice shaking. To save his money. It is a Hail Mary pass, Sarah said. It is unlikely to work legally because we have the emails where you sound perfectly rational and professional, but socially. In your family circle. He is destroying my reputation, I realized. That is why Kelsey texted me about being jealous. That is why Mom texted me about Evan being weak. They are building a dossier to prove I am the problem. I looked at the phone sitting on my desk. The screen was dark, but I knew that inside it, the messages were piling up. Let him try, I said. Faith, this is going to get ugly, Sarah warned. If he can't beat you in court, he will try to break you in person. He needs that signature. He has 5 days left. He is going to try to force a confrontation. I won't see him, I said. I won't let him in my house. He might not come to your house, Sarah said. He knows you can slam the door. He will try to get you somewhere where you can't leave, somewhere public, somewhere where the pressure of family image works in his favor. Like where? I don't know, Sarah said. But be ready. Keep your phone recording. Keep your texts saved. Do not engage in emotional arguments. If they say, you are crazy, you say, show me the ledger. If they say, you are hurting the family, you say, show me the bank statements. Stick to the facts. The facts are your shield. I ended the call and sat in the silence of my office. I thought about my father, Harold Stewart, the man who always wore a suit to dinner, the man who lectured me about fiscal responsibility while I struggled to pay for Evan's daycare. He was a fraud. He was a gambler who had bet the farm and lost, and now he was trying to steal my son's future to pay his bookie. My phone buzzed again. It was Marcus. Faith. I just heard Mom on the phone with the pastor. She is crying. She is telling him that they want to host a reconciliation dinner for the holidays. She wants to invite everyone. She says it is to heal the rift. I stared at the text. A reconciliation dinner. It was perfect. It was diabolical. If I refused to go, I proved their point that I was bitter, unstable, and unforgiving. I would be the villain who rejected the olive branch. If I went, I would be walking into a trap. They would ambush me. They would have the documents ready. They would use the pressure of the pastor, the neighbors, and the holiday spirit to guilt me into signing. They would surround me with people who thought I was the problem and demand I do the right thing. It wasn't a dinner. It was a public execution of my boundaries. I typed back to Marcus, "It is a trap. Marcus, they want an audience." Marcus replied instantly, "I know. Dad just told Kelsey to make sure the notary is invited." The notary? They were bringing a notary to a dinner party. I felt a strange, cold calm wash over me. It was the calm of the risk analyst who finally sees the full scope of the disaster scenario. They thought they could shame me into submission. They thought that if they put me in a room with enough respectable people, I would revert to the obedient daughter who just wanted everyone to be happy. They were wrong. I opened my laptop again. I created a new folder titled The Dinner. I dragged the screenshot of Diane's text into it. I dragged the email from Arthur Vance into it. I dragged the PDF of the bank loan details Sarah had sent me into it. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to run. If they wanted a show, I would give them one. But I wouldn't be reading from their script. I stood up and walked to the window. Evan was in the backyard, building a snowman. He looked happy. He looked safe. Only family gets to eat, I whispered to the glass. Well, Dad, you invited me to dinner. I hope you have an appetite for the truth, because I am bringing the receipts. Wednesday morning arrived not with sunlight, but with a digital avalanche. My attorney, Sarah, had been right. When faced with a legal demand for inspection, my father did exactly what corporate bullies always do. He tried to bury me in paper. At 8 o'clock in the morning, my email inbox dinged with a secure file transfer notification. It was a data dump of over 3,000 pages scanned receipts, bank statements, tax returns, and meeting minutes for Stewart Heritage Holdings, LLC dating back to 2020. He thought the sheer volume would intimidate me. He thought I would look at the mountain of PDFs, get a headache, and give up. He forgot that I do this for a living. I am a risk analyst. Finding the needle in the haystack is not just my job. It is my art form. I poured a fresh pot of coffee, settled into my office chair, and opened the first file. Okay, Dad, I whispered to the screen. Let's see where the money went. For the first 2 hours, it was mundane: property taxes, insurance premiums, snow removal services for the driveway in Bayfield. It all looked legitimate, but as I moved into 2022, I started noticing a pattern. There were recurring payments to a vendor listed as Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting. The amounts were inconsistent but significant. $3,000 here, $5,000 there. By the time I tallied up the last 18 months, the total was nearly $45,000. I frowned. The cabin was a rustic vacation home. It did not need lifestyle consulting. We did not run it as a hotel. We did not have a concierge. I pulled up the Wisconsin Department of Financial Institutions website and ran a search for Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting. The registered agent was a woman named Jessica Miller. The name rang a bell, but I couldn't place it immediately. I went to Instagram, I typed in the name, and there she was. Jessica Miller, best friend, maid of honor, and college roommate of my sister, Kelsey. I scrolled through Jessica's feed. It was full of brunch photos, vague inspirational quotes, and pictures of her and Kelsey on planning retreats. I went back to the ledger. The dates of the payments to Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting matched up almost perfectly with the dates of these retreats. My hands went cold. My father wasn't just using the LLC to secure his own loans. He was using the family cabin's maintenance fund to subsidize Kelsey's social life. He was funneling money out of the company money that theoretically belonged 15% to me and washing it through a sham vendor to put cash in Kelsey's circle. I kept digging. I found invoices for interior design consultation totaling $12,000. The cabin looked exactly the same as it did 10 years ago. I found marketing fees for a property that we never rented out to the public. It was a siphon. The cabin was not just a piece of real estate. It was a machine designed to pump money toward the golden child while maintaining the illusion of a shared family asset. I had paid $15,000 to fix the roof so Kelsey's friends could get paid $5,000 to consult on the throw pillows. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Check your email," he wrote. I went through the old physical files in Dad's study while he was meeting with the lawyer. "You need to see this." I opened the new email from Marcus. It was a photo of a yellowed piece of paper. It looked like the minutes from the initial meeting when the family trust was formed, years before the LLC. I zoomed in on the paragraph Marcus had circled in red marker. Structure of beneficiaries: primary active beneficiary, Kelsey Stewart, custodian of aesthetic maintenance. Secondary active beneficiary, Marcus Stewart, custodian of grounds. Contingent beneficiary, Faith Stewart. Non-participating unless necessary for solvency. I read the phrase again. Non-participating unless necessary for solvency. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was like being punched in the solar plexus. There it was, in black and white, signed by my father and mother in 2018. They had codified it, to them. I was not a person. I was not a daughter. I was a contingency. I was a break glass in case of emergency option. I was non-participating, meaning I had no voice, no vote, no seat at the table until they needed solvency. Until they needed my money. That was why they asked me to buy into the LLC when the roof collapsed. That was why they needed me now for the refinance. I was the financial battery they plugged in when their own power ran low. I sat back, staring at the ceiling. A tear leaked out of the corner of my eye, hot and angry. "Only family gets to eat," I said aloud. It wasn't a slip of the tongue at the Christmas party. It was the mission statement. I was the one who hunted and cooked the food, but I wasn't allowed to sit at the table to eat it. I was the staff. I wiped the tear away aggressively. Sadness was useless. Anger was fuel. I called Sarah. "I have the files," I said when she answered. "And Sarah, it is fraud, or at least, it is gross mismanagement." "Tell me," Sarah said. I walked her through the payments to Kelsey's friend. I told her about the non-participating clause in the old trust documents. "That clause isn't legally binding on the LLC operating agreement," Sarah noted, her voice sharp, "but it establishes intent. It proves they view you as a financial resource, not a partner. This helps us. Faith. It proves bad faith dealing." "I want out," I said. "I don't want to be their contingency anymore. I want my 15%, and I want to sever ties." "We can do that," Sarah said. "But if we force a buyout now, your father is broke. He can't pay you. The checks will bounce." "I don't want his cash," I said. "I want the equity. I want to secure my share of the cabin so he can never touch it again. Can we partition the interest?" "We can do better," Sarah said. "We can file a motion to lock your interest into a separate trust for Evan. We structure it so that your 15% is untouchable by any of Harold's creditors. It becomes a lien on the property. If he sells, Evan gets paid first. If he refinances, he can't touch that 15% equity." "Do it," I said. "Draft it." "There is one more thing," Sarah said. She hesitated. "I didn't want to tell you this until I was sure, but I found a draft document in the batch they sent over. It looks like it was scanned by accident. It was mixed in with the insurance policies." "What is it?" "It is a gift of equity form." I frowned. "A gift?" "It was prepared for your signature," Sarah explained. "It was dated for the day of the Christmas party. The plan wasn't just to get you to sign the refinance waiver. Faith, this document, it transfers your 15% interest in the LLC to Kelsey Stewart as holiday gift for a value of $1. The room spun. They were going to make me sign away my share. They were going to slip it in with the other papers, Sarah said. "They were going to tell you it was just a formality to help Dad with the bank. If you had signed that, you would have walked away with nothing. Kelsey would have owned 45% of the company. Your father would have had his loan, and you would have been erased." I felt sick, physically sick. I thought about the party. I thought about how my mother had practically shoved me toward the dessert table, keeping me distracted while my father waited in the study with his papers. They didn't just forget dessert for my son. They were planning to steal his inheritance while he ate it. "He would have tricked me," I whispered. "He would have looked me in the face, wished me a Merry Christmas, and stolen nearly $100,000 of equity from me." "Yes," Sarah said. "That was the plan." "Okay," I said. My voice was steady now, terrifyingly steady. "File the motion for the trust. And Sarah, I want full accounting for the consulting fees too. I want Kelsey deposed if we have to. I want to know exactly what lifestyle advice cost $45,000. "I will have the papers ready by tomorrow," Sarah said. "But Faith, be prepared. When they realize you know about the gift scheme, and when they realize you found the money trail to Kelsey, the gloves will come off. They will stop pretending to be civil. They stopped being civil when they took the spoon out of my son's hand." I said. I hung up. I needed air. I walked out of my office and into the kitchen. I drank a glass of water, trying to wash the taste of betrayal out of my mouth. Then, my phone buzzed with a notification from my neighborhood group chat. I usually ignored these. It was mostly complaints about people not picking up after their dogs or parking on the street during snow emergencies. But this message had my name in it. It was from Mrs. Gable, my neighbor and occasional babysitter. She had sent me a private screenshot of a post from a private Facebook group called Brookfield Community Prayer Circle. Mrs. Gable Faith, honey, I thought you should see this. I don't believe a word of it, but people are talking. I opened the screenshot. It was a post by Diane Stewart. Please pray for our family during this difficult season. Our hearts are breaking. We have worked our whole lives to build a legacy for our children, but unfortunately, greed can poison even the closest bonds. Our daughter Faith has decided to sue us to try and seize control of our retirement assets. We are at risk of losing our family cabin because she is demanding we liquidate it to pay her out. It is so hard when a child you raised with love turns on you for money. We are just praying she finds peace and stops this attack on her own parents. There were 50 comments already. How awful, so ungrateful. I always thought she looked a bit cold. Stay strong. Diane. God sees the truth. I stared at the screen. She was twisting the narrative so violently it was almost impressive. She was accusing me of exactly what they were doing to me. Projecting. They were the ones stealing. They were the ones liquidating. They were the ones driven by greed. But she had the microphone. She had the prayer circle. She had the tears. I felt a surge of panic. This was my reputation. These were people I had known since childhood. But then, I remembered the ledger. I remembered the $45,000 to Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting. I remembered the gift of equity form. Let them talk. Let them pray. Diane Stewart thought she was controlling the narrative because she was loud. She didn't realize that in a court of law, God doesn't read Facebook posts. The judge reads bank statements. I typed a reply to Mrs. Gable. Thank you for showing me this. Mary, it is not true, obviously, but I'm not going to fight it on Facebook. I am going to handle it in court. I put the phone down. The legacy my father was so obsessed with wasn't a monument. It was a hole, a deep, dark pit, where they threw everything money, truth, and their own children to keep up appearances, and I was the only one with a ladder. I walked into the living room where Evan was playing. Hey, Mom, he said, not looking up from his game. Are we going to Grandma's for New Year's? I looked at him. I looked at his innocence. No, buddy, I said gently. We are going to start our own tradition this year. Okay, he said, shrugging. Can we have pizza? We can have whatever we want, I said. Because we are the ones buying it. I went back to my office. I had one more email to write, not to my lawyer, not to my family. I opened the document containing the Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting invoices. I printed them out. Then I opened the gift of equity draft. I printed that out too. I put them in a folder. If they wanted a reconciliation dinner, I would bring the appetizers. The truth was a dish best served cold, and in Wisconsin, we know all about the cold. The digital invitation arrived with the subtlety of a neon sign in a library. It was Thursday afternoon, 2 days before the bank's deadline, when my phone pinged with a Facebook notification. My mother, Diane Stewart, had created an event. She had made it public, ensuring that the algorithm would push it into the feeds of every single person we knew in Brookfield. The title was written in capital letters, The Stewart Family Holiday Reconciliation Dinner. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. The banner image was a stock photo of a cozy fireplace with stockings hung with care stockings that looked nothing like the ones currently hanging in her cold, manicured living room. The description was a masterclass in passive-aggressive public relations. Please join us this Friday evening for a special gathering of friends and loved ones. The holidays are a time for forgiveness, healing, and coming together. We are opening our home to celebrate the bonds that matter most. We are praying for a full family reunion. Food, drinks, and love provided. 6 o'clock. It was followed by a string of emojis: a snowflake, a pair of praying hands, a red heart, and a dove. I clicked on the guest list. It was not an intimate family dinner to discuss the misunderstanding or to look at the ledgers I had demanded. There were 42 people invited. I scrolled through the names. It was a strategic roll call of witnesses. There was Reverend Miller from the church. There were the neighbors on both sides of the fence. There were my father's golf buddies and their wives. There were even a few of Kelsey's friends, including Jessica Miller, the recipient of the mysterious consulting fees. Marcus was on the list. Kelsey was on the list. I was not. I wasn't tagged. I wasn't invited. I was the subject of the dinner, the prodigal daughter they were praying for. But I had not received a notification to attend. This was the trap. If I showed up, I would be crashing a party I wasn't technically invited to, looking aggressive and unstable. If I stayed home, Diane would stand in the center of the room, dab a dry eye with a handkerchief, and tell 42 people that she had tried everything. But Faith just refused to accept her olive branch. She would paint me as the bitter, cold-hearted woman who rejected a reconciliation dinner. I scrolled down to the comments section. It was already filling up with praise for my mother's sainthood. Diane, you are such a big person to do this. Family is everything. Praying she comes. So lovely. The Stewarts are the heart of this community. They were applauding the performance. They had no idea that the stage was built on rotten wood and leveraged debt. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. Did you see it? I typed back immediately. I am looking at it right now. It is a circus. Marcus. She invited the Reverend. Marcus replied. It is not just a circus. It is a courtroom. They want witnesses. Dad told me this morning that if you don't sign the waiver by Saturday, he is going to file the emergency motion on Monday. He wants to use this dinner to show that they are the reasonable ones and you are the one refusing to engage. So if I don't go, I lose, I wrote, and if you go, they ambush you. Marcus countered. They will have the papers there. Dad will probably try to pressure you into signing in front of the Reverend. He will make it about honoring the family and forgiveness. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer, vibrating intensity of the adrenaline. I looked into the living room. Evan was watching a movie, totally oblivious to the fact that his grandmother was currently using his rejection as a marketing tool for her social standing. I could not bring him. That was the one non-negotiable variable. I would not subject my son to a room full of people who viewed him as a difficult child or a prop in my mother's play. But I had to go. I had to walk into that house, past the reconciliation banner, and refuse to play the role they had cast for me. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. I am going, I said the moment he answered. Faith, are you sure? Marcus sounded anxious. It is going to be brutal. Kelsey is already rehearsing her speeches about how much she misses you. It is going to be gaslighting on an industrial scale. Let them talk, I said. I am not coming to argue. Marcus, I am not coming to scream. If I scream, they win. If I cry, they win. Then what are you going to do? I am going to bring the folder, I said. I am going to bring the invoices for Jessica Miller. I am going to bring the gift of equity draft. And I am going to bring the email from the bank. You are going to serve them with evidence at a cocktail party? Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. I am going to stand there and be the calmest person in the room. I told him. And when they try to tell the neighbors that I am destroying the legacy, I am going to ask them very politely to explain where the $45,000 went. I am going to ask them why they need my signature if I am not family. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then, he let out a long breath. Okay, he said. I am with you. I won't drink. I will stay sober. I will stick to the facts. We need a signal, I said. If Dad starts getting physical if he tries to corner me in the study, you step in. I will be your shadow, Marcus promised. I am done being Switzerland. I hung up and went to my closet. I needed armor. I bypassed the soft sweaters and the festive red dresses. I chose a tailored navy blue blazer, a crisp white shirt, and dark trousers. It was what I wore when I had to present a risk assessment to the board of directors at my firm. It said professional, It said detached. It said, "I am not here to bake cookies. I am here to audit you." As I was laying out the clothes, my phone buzzed again. It was another text from Marcus. Holy cow. Look at this. He sent a screenshot of a text conversation he had just had. The sender's name was Mrs. Higgins. I knew Mrs. Higgins. She was a neighbor who lived 3 houses down from my parents. She was a quiet woman, a retired nurse who mostly kept to herself but always sent Evan a card on Halloween. The text read on Marcus. I saw your mom's Facebook event. I hope you don't mind me asking, is Faith okay? I have been feeling terrible since Christmas Eve. I was standing near the buffet table when Diane took the pudding. I heard what she said to that sweet little boy. Only family gets to eat. It made my stomach turn. I just wanted to know if Evan is all right. That wasn't a joke. Marcus, that was cruel. I stared at the screenshot. The air in my bedroom seemed to get lighter, cleaner. They heard, I whispered. For 3 days, Diane and Kelsey had been telling me I was crazy. They had been telling me I was sensitive, that I had imagined the tone, that it was a joke everyone laughed at. They had tried to rewrite my reality, but Mrs. Higgins had heard it. A neutral third party had witnessed the cruelty and had identified it as cruelty. I typed back to Marcus, "Save that text, back it up, print it out, way ahead of you." Marcus replied, "Diane thinks she has an audience of fans. She doesn't realize there are witnesses in the crowd." This changed everything. I wasn't just walking in with financial documents now. I was walking in with moral high ground. They could lie about the money. They could spin the business deals. But they couldn't undo the fact that a grandmother had starved a child in front of the neighborhood. I arranged childcare with Mrs. Gable. She agreed to take Evan for the evening, promising him pizza and a movie marathon. "You look like you are going to war, dear," Mrs. Gable said when I dropped him off at 5:30. "I am just going to dinner," I said, kissing Evan on the head. "But yes, sometimes that is the same thing." "Mom, are you going to bring me a piece of cake this time?" Evan asked, looking up from his boots. The question was innocent, but it cut me deep. "No, honey," I said, crouching down. "I am not bringing anything back from that house. We have our own cake at home. Better cake." I drove to Brookfield in silence. The roads were slick with black ice. The snow piled high on the banks. The Christmas lights on the mansions blurred past me, streaks of red and green in the dark. When I turned onto my parents' street, the driveway was already full. Cars lined the curb. The house was blazing with light. I could see silhouettes moving behind the curtains. I could imagine the scene inside the warm fire, the smell of expensive catering, my father holding court with a scotch in hand, my mother playing the victim saint. I parked my sedan down the street, away from the cluster of luxury SUVs. I grabbed my leather tote bag. Inside was the folder, the receipts. I walked up the driveway. The wind bit at my face, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt a strange, icy heat radiating from my core. I reached the front door. I could hear the murmur of voices inside, the clink of glass, the soft jazz music playing over the speakers. I didn't knock. I still had a key. I was, after all, a member of the LLC that owned the property. Even if they treated me like a trespasser, I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The warmth of the house hit me, carrying the scent of pine and roasting meat. I stepped into the foyer. Conversations didn't stop immediately. It took a moment for people to notice. First, Mrs. Higgins saw me. She gave me a small, sad nod from the corner. Then, Kelsey saw me. She was standing by the staircase, holding a glass of wine. Her eyes went wide, and she nudged her husband. Then, Diane saw me. She was in the center of the living room, wearing a shimmering silver dress, holding the hands of the Reverend. She looked up, and for a split second, her face contorted in genuine shock. She hadn't expected me to actually come. She expected to play the martyr to my absence. But then, the mask slid back into place. "Faith," she cried out, her voice pitching up into a theatrical sob of joy. She opened her arms wide, performing for the 40 people watching. "Oh, thank God the prodigal returns. Everyone, look, my daughter is here." She rushed toward me, aiming for a hug that would seal the narrative of reconciliation. I didn't step back. I didn't step forward. I just stood there, my hands firmly gripping the strap of my bag, my face completely impassive. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden hush of the room, it carried to every corner. "Oh, come here, let me look at you," she gushed, reaching for my shoulders. "We were just praying for this. Where is Evan? Where is my grandson?" "He is safe," I said, stepping smoothly to the side so her hands grasped at empty air. "He is somewhere where he is allowed to eat." A ripple of uneasy silence moved through the room. The smile on Diane's face faltered, the edges trembling. "Faith, honey, don't start," she hissed under her breath, her back to the guests. Then, louder. "Come, get a drink. Your father is in the study. He is dying to see you." "I am sure he is," I said. I looked across the room and locked eyes with Marcus. He was standing by the fireplace, a glass of seltzer in his hand. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. "I am here. I am ready." I walked past my mother, ignoring her outstretched hand. I walked into the crowded living room, nodding politely to the neighbors who were watching with wide eyes. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to deliver a reality check. And as I moved toward the study, feeling the weight of the evidence against my hip, I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't a party, it was a deposition. And I was the only one who had brought the truth. The hours before I walked into my parents' house for the so-called reconciliation dinner were not spent crying. They were spent running a printing press. It was 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Outside, the Wisconsin sky was a bruised purple, threatening more snow. Inside my home office, the laser printer was humming a steady, rhythmic beat that sounded like a heartbeat. Thwack, slide, thwack, slide. I was building a physical timeline. My lawyer, Sarah, had told me that in high-stress confrontations, memory fails, but paper does not. Gaslighting works because it relies on the fluidity of recall. My mother relied on me doubting my own version of events. She relied on the emotional fog. So, I was clearing the fog with ink. I taped the first sheet of paper to my wall, stepping back to look at the narrative arc. December 24th, 7:30 in the evening, the incident. Evan is denied food. The quote, "only family gets to eat," is spoken. December 25th, 7 in the morning. The panic. 33 missed calls begin. December 26th, 10 in the morning. The threat. Arthur Vance emails about tax liabilities and demands a signature. December 27th. The discovery. The bank loan details. The bridge loan default risk. And the Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting payments. December 29th. The trap. The reconciliation dinner is announced. When you looked at it like that, laid out in black and white, it wasn't a family drama, it was a heist. My doorbell rang at 3:30. It was Marcus. He didn't look like the terrified man I had met at the coffee shop earlier in the week. He looked grim. He was carrying a thick legal expanding file under his arm. He stomped the snow off his boots and walked straight into my kitchen, placing the file on the island next to my cooling rack of cookies I had baked for Evan, not for the party. "I got it," Marcus said. He didn't say hello. "I met with David again. He drafted a summary of your rights as a minority shareholder under Wisconsin law." He opened the file and slid a document toward me. "It is called a partition of interest," Marcus explained, pointing to the highlighted section. "David says that because the operating agreement doesn't have a specific buyout clause for this scenario, you have the right to petition the court to separate your financial interest from theirs. Basically, we can force them to create a constructive trust. Your 15% becomes a lien on the property. They can't sell, they can't refinance, and they can't borrow against the cabin until your trust is fully funded. Which means," I said, reading the legal jargon, "that if Dad wants his loan from the bank next week, he has to guarantee my payout first." "Exactly," Marcus said. "He is trying to get you to sign a subordination agreement. That is what he has waiting for you tonight. He wants you to agree that the bank gets paid before you do. If you sign that, and he defaults on the tech park deal, The bank takes the cabin, and you get zero. I looked at my brother. You are helping me destroy his plan. Marcus, you know that, right? Marcus leaned against the counter. He looked at the timeline taped to my wall. He stared at the entry for Christmas Eve. I have been thinking about it. Faith, he said quietly, for 20 years. I thought my job was to keep the peace. I thought if I just nodded and smiled and managed their moods, I was being a good son. But I wasn't keeping the peace. I was keeping the secrets. He picked up a cookie, looked at it, and put it back down. He had no appetite. I am a hostage, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I have been an emotional hostage since I was 12. If I did what they wanted, I was the favorite. If I had an opinion, I was difficult. I watched them do it to you, and I was just glad it wasn't me. But when I saw Evan's face, I realized they are going to do it to him too. They are going to make him dance for his dinner for the rest of his life. He looked at me, his eyes clear. I am not doing it anymore. I am standing next to you tonight. If Dad screams, let him scream. If Mom cries, let her cry. I am done being their sanitizer. My phone buzzed on the counter, breaking the moment. It was a text from Kelsey. Faith, please tell me you are coming. Mom is a wreck. She's been cooking for 2 days. Just come. Apologize for the drama. And let's have a nice night. Don't embarrass us in front of the neighbors. We have a reputation in this town. I read it aloud. She is worried about embarrassment. She is worried about the notary leaving before you arrive, Marcus noted dryly. I picked up the phone. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I decided not to be polite. I decided to be accurate. Mom embarrassed my son first. I typed, she humiliated a 10-year-old boy over a piece of pudding. I am not coming to apologize. I am coming to clarify. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged again. I assumed it was Kelsey firing back a retort about my selfishness. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved. But the area code was local. I opened the message. Hi, Kelsey. It is Mrs. Montgomery from the club. Just checking if your sister is actually showing up. I know your dad is stressed about the paperwork. Tell Faith to just come sign the papers and make peace so it looks good for everyone. We are all rooting for a happy ending. I stared at the screen. Mrs. Montgomery, one of my mother's bridge partners. She had meant to text Kelsey. She had texted Faith. I laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of laughter that made Marcus jump. What? He asked. Look, I said, handing him the phone. Marcus read it and shook his head in disbelief. They aren't even hiding it. The whole town knows. They have spun a story that you are holding the family hostage with paperwork, and the happy ending is you capitulating. She says, just come sign the papers, I said. That is the script. Everyone at that party has been primed. They think I am a stubborn child refusing to sign a permission slip. They don't know I am a shareholder refusing to be defrauded. This is good, Marcus said, tapping the screen. Print this too. Add it to the folder. The folder is getting heavy, I said. Good, Marcus replied. You are going to need a weapon. I spent the next hour assembling the binder. I bought a plain black 3-ring binder from my supply shelf. I didn't want it to look messy. I wanted it to look professional. Tab 1. The timeline. Tab 2. The financials. The Lakeside Lifestyle invoices were right on top. Tab 3. The legal rights. Marcus's summary. Tab 4. The communications. The only family quote. The texts. The sealing everything voicemail transcript. I labeled the spine of the binder, Bayfield Cabin. Facts. At 5:30, I went upstairs to get dressed. My lawyer, Sarah, had given me very specific instructions on my demeanor. Do not insult them, she had told me over the phone earlier. Do not call them names. Do not raise your voice. The moment you scream, you validate their story that you are unstable. You need to be a gray rock. You are boring. You are factual. And you are immovable. You state the event. You state the impact. And you request the responsibility. That is it. I stood in front of my closet. My mother would expect me to wear something festive if I was coming to reconcile, or if I was coming to beg. Something frantic and disheveled. I reached for my navy blue blazer. It was structured, sharp-shouldered, and severe. I paired it with a white silk blouse that buttoned all the way to the neck, no vulnerability, no exposed skin. I put on dark trousers and black leather boots with a heel that clicked solidly against the floor. I pulled my hair back into a tight, low bun. I applied my makeup sparingly. I didn't want to hide my face, but I didn't want to look like I was trying to impress anyone. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like Faith Stewart, the daughter who used to desperate for approval. I looked like a forensic auditor who had just found a smoking gun. "You are not going there to be loved," I told my reflection. "You are going there to take back the story." I walked downstairs. Marcus was waiting by the door. He had changed into a suit, but he had left the tie off. He looked like a man attending a funeral for someone he didn't particularly like. "Ready?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "But let's go anyway." "Remember," Marcus said as he opened the door to the biting winter wind, "the moment they put a piece of paper in front of you, I step in. You don't even have to touch it." "I am not afraid of their paper anymore," I said, patting the leather tote bag where the black binder sat. "I have my own." We walked out to our separate cars. The air was frigid, the kind of Wisconsin cold that freezes the moisture in your nose instantly. As I drove toward Brookfield, rehearsing my opening lines, I thought about the text from Mrs. Montgomery. Make peace so it looks good. That was their entire philosophy. It didn't matter if the house was rotting from the inside, as long as the paint on the outside looked fresh. It didn't matter if they starved a child, as long as the family photo looked happy. Tonight, I was going to peel the paint. I turned onto the familiar streets of my childhood. The houses got bigger, the driveways longer, the lights more ostentatious. I felt a phantom ache in my chest, the ghost of the little girl who just wanted to belong in this world. But then I remembered Evan asking, "Are we not family?" And the ghost vanished, replaced by the mother who would burn this entire facade to the ground to keep him warm. I pulled up to the house. I saw the cars. I saw the lights. I took a deep breath, grabbed my binder, and prepared to crash the party of the year. The moment I stepped fully into the foyer, the heat of the house hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just the thermal heat of a furnace working overtime to combat the Wisconsin winter. It was the suffocating, humid warmth of too many bodies packed into a space designed for appearances, not comfort. The air smelled of expensive pine candles, roasted tenderloin, and the cloying sweetness of mulled wine. To anyone else, it smelled like Christmas. To me, it smelled like a cover-up. My mother, Diane, was already moving toward me. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, their faces painted with identical expressions of relieved voyeurism. They were witnessing the climax of the holiday drama, and they were desperate for the happy ending my mother had promised on Facebook. "Faith," Diane's voice was a bell, clear and bright, designed to reach the back of the room. She reached out and grabbed my forearms, her grip surprisingly tight. Her nails dug into the fabric of my navy blazer. "I knew you wouldn't stay mad. I told Harold. She is a Stewart. She knows where she belongs." She didn't wait for me to answer. She turned me toward the room, displaying me like a trophy hunter showing off a prize catch. "Look, everyone," she announced, beaming. "The family is whole again. Autumn is good." A ripple of applause went through the room, actual applause. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. They were clapping for my submission. They were clapping because they thought I had come to kiss the ring and sign the paper. I didn't smile. I didn't pull away. But I didn't lean in. I stood as still as a statue, my leather tote bag heavy against my hip. "Hello, Mom," I said. My voice was low, flat, and completely devoid of the warmth she was projecting. "Oh, stop being so stiff," she hissed under her breath, her smile never wavering for the audience. "Mrs. Montgomery is watching. Smile. Faith, do it for your father. He has had heart palpitations all day because of you." I am sure his heart is fine, I said. It is his liquidity that is the problem. Diane's eyes widened, a flash of genuine fear cutting through the performance. She squeezed my arms harder, then released me with a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. She is such a joker, Diane told the nearest group of guests. Come, darling, your father is in the great room. We are about to make a toast. She herded me forward. As I walked through the crowd, I felt the eyes, 40 pairs of eyes, assessing, judging. They saw a daughter who had almost ruined Christmas. They didn't see the woman who had spent the last 3 days uncovering a financial sinkhole. I saw Marcus across the room. He was leaning against the mantelpiece, holding a glass of club soda. He looked pale. When our eyes met, he gave a micro-nod, acknowledging the black binder in my bag. He moved slightly, positioning himself closer to where my father was standing. Harold Stewart was holding court in front of the 12-foot Christmas tree. He looked every inch the patriarch, silver hair perfectly coiffed, a tumbler of scotch in one hand, his other hand resting on the back of a velvet armchair. He looked powerful. He looked rich. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He just nodded, a king acknowledging a vassal who had finally returned to pay tribute. Everyone, Harold boomed. His voice was a rich baritone that had closed 1,000 deals. The room went silent. The jazz music seemed to fade into the background. Thank you all for coming tonight, Harold began. He raised his glass. The holidays can be a stressful time. We all know that. Tempers flare, misunderstandings happen, but tonight, we are reminded of the only truth that matters. He paused for effect, looking directly at me. Blood is blood, he declared. Friends come and go, business partners change, but family is the bedrock. We build legacies not for ourselves, but for the generations that come after us. Sometimes, that requires sacrifice. Sometimes, it requires forgiveness, but in the end, we do what is necessary to protect the name. Here, shouted a man in the back, one of his golf buddies. To the Stewarts, someone else cried. Harold took a sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving mine. It was a masterful speech. He had taken his own greed and repackaged it as a noble sacrifice. He had framed my resistance not as a defense of my son, but as a failure to understand legacy. I felt a tap on my elbow. It was Diane. The public greeting was over. Now the work began. Faith, she whispered, her voice tight. Come with me to the kitchen for a second. I have those recipes you wanted. It was a clumsy lie. I hadn't asked for recipes, but she needed to get me away from the witnesses. Of course, I said. I would love to see what you are cooking. She led me through the swinging door into the kitchen. The noise of the party vanished instantly, replaced by the hum of the sub-zero refrigerator and the clatter of the caterers who were busy arranging trays of hors d'oeuvres on the island. Diane waved a hand at the catering staff. Give us a moment. Please, out. Go check the dining room. The staff, sensing the tension, evaporated through the back door. We were alone. The mask dropped instantly. Diane's face went from beatific to furious. You have some nerve, she said, her voice trembling with rage. Walking in here like the Queen of Sheba after ignoring your father for 3 days. Do you have any idea how embarrassed we were? I imagine it was difficult, I said calmly. It is hard to maintain a facade when the foundation is cracking. Don't you start with that smart mouth, she snapped. She walked over to the counter where a stack of mail was sitting. She pulled out a large manila envelope. Your father is willing to overlook your tantrum. He is willing to forgive the fact that you blocked our numbers, but we need to settle this tonight. Before the dinner is served, she thrust the envelope toward me. What is this? I asked, though I knew exactly what it was. Just some small paperwork, she said, waving her hand dismissively. For the bank, to clear up the title issues so we can secure the retirement funds. It is just a formality. Faith, Arthur said it basically just says you trust your father to handle the business. I took the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a document titled, Unanimous Written Consent of the Members of Stewart Heritage Holdings, LLC. I scanned the first paragraph. The undersigned member hereby waives notice of meeting and consents to the managing member, Harold Stewart, encumbering the property known as the Bayfield Cabin as collateral for the refinancing of existing commercial debt, and there, at the bottom, was a line for my signature. And next to it, a sticky note that said, "Sign here, urgent." "It doesn't look like a formality," I said, looking up at her. "It looks like a lien. It looks like you are asking me to let Dad gamble my inheritance on a bridge loan that is already in default." Diane's face went white. Who told you that?" "I can read, Mother," I said, "and I have a lawyer." "You are being selfish," she hissed. "This is for the family. If he doesn't get this loan, we lose the Brookfield house. We lose everything. Do you want to be the reason your parents are homeless?" "I am not the one who took out a high-risk loan on a tech park that doesn't exist," I said. Diane grabbed my arm again. "Just sign it. Faith, do it now, and we can go out there and have a nice dinner. Kelsey is going to announce her promotion. Don't ruin this for her." "Her promotion?" I asked. "You mean her new role managing the consulting fees?" Diane froze. Before she could answer, the kitchen door swung open. Marcus walked in. He looked at Diane, then at me, then at the paper in my hand. "Don't sign it," Marcus said. His voice was steady, clearer than I had heard it in years. "Marcus," Diane gasped. "Get out. This is between me and your sister." "No, it isn't," Marcus said. Stepping between us, he took the paper from my hand and looked at the header. "Temporary consent." "This isn't temporary. Mom, this is a permanent subordination agreement. If she signs this, she goes to the back of the line. If Dad defaults, the bank takes the cabin, and Faith gets zero. I read the draft. You." Diane looked at her son as if he had just slapped her. "You are siding with her after everything we have done for you." "You didn't do it for me," Marcus said. "You did it for the image, and I am done." Diane burst into tears. It was instantaneous. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, her shoulders shaking. "I can't believe this," she sobbed, loud enough that I worried the guests might hear through the door. "My own children, conspiring against me. I have spent my whole life building this family. I host the dinners, I buy the presents, and this is how you repay me. You are destroying my reputation. Mrs. Montgomery is out there. The Reverend is out there. What am I supposed to tell them?" I watched her cry. I watched the performance of grief. "You could tell them the truth," I said. "The truth." Diane spun on me, her eyes wet but venomous. "The truth is that you are a cold, ungrateful woman who can't get over a divorce, so you are taking it out on us. You are trying to humiliate your father because you are jealous of his success." I waited. I waited for one specific sentence. "How is Evan? I am sorry I hurt him. Is my grandson okay?" She cried for 3 minutes. She lamented her reputation. She lamented the house. She lamented the stress. She never mentioned Evan's name, not once. The kitchen door opened again. This time it was Kelsey. She breezed in, holding her wineglass, looking annoyed. "Mom, what is taking so long?" Kelsey asked. "Dad is getting impatient. He wants to do the toast." She stopped when she saw the scene, Diane sobbing, Marcus standing guard, and me holding the folder. "Oh my God," Kelsey groaned, rolling her eyes. "Are you doing this now?" "Really?" "Faith, can't you just suck it up for one night?" "She won't sign," Diane wailed, pointing at me. "She wants to see us on the street." Kelsey turned to me, her lip curling. "You are unbelievable. You always have to be the victim, don't you? Oh, poor Faith. Everyone is so mean to her. It is pathetic. Dad is trying to save the business. And you are holding a grudge over a bowl of pudding. Grow up." "It wasn't pudding," Marcus said sharply. "It was respect." "Shut up." "Marcus," Kelsey snapped. "You are just jealous because Dad put me in charge of the cabin accounts." I looked at Kelsey. I looked at the sister who had been bought with $45,000 of consulting fees. She didn't know she was a thief. She thought she was a businesswoman. That was the tragedy of it. They had corrupted her so completely, she didn't even know she was dirty. I am not playing the victim, Kelsey, I said quietly. I am playing the auditor. I put the envelope back on the counter. I am not signing this. Diane stopped crying abruptly. She wiped her face with a cocktail napkin, her expression hardening into concrete. Fine, she said. If you want to do this the hard way, we will do it the hard way. Your father is waiting. She walked to the swinging door and pushed it open. She composed her face in the reflection of the oven glass, putting the smile back on. Harold, she called out into the party, her voice gay and festive again. Harold, darling, everyone is here. Why don't we gather in the living room? I think it is time to settle everything. The chatter in the other room died down. I could hear the shuffling of feet as 40 people moved toward the center of the house. Marcus looked at me. His face was pale, but his eyes were fierce. This is it, he whispered. They are going to ambush you. Dad is going to put you on the spot in front of the Reverend. He is going to ask you to honor the family, publicly. I adjusted my grip on the black binder. I felt the weight of the Bayfield cabin facts against my side. Let him ask, I said. Are you ready? Marcus asked. Now or never. I have been ready since Christmas Eve, I said. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I took a deep breath of the kitchen air that smelled of roasting meat and old lies. Then, I pushed open the door and walked into the arena. The room was warm, smelling of pine needles and expensive cologne, but as I walked into the great room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father, Harold Stewart, stood by the fireplace. He looked like the portrait of a patriarch. He held his crystal tumbler of scotch, the amber liquid catching the light of the fire. The guests' neighbors, church friends, business partners were arranged around him in a semicircle of admiration. They were waiting for the speech. They were waiting for the performance of the year. I stood near the archway, my hand resting on the spine of the black binder in my bag. Marcus stood a few feet away from me, his face pale but his jaw set like stone. Friends, Harold began, his voice booming with that charismatic resonance that had sold commercial real estate for 40 years. Thank you for being here. Tonight is special. We have had a challenging week. We have had some misunderstandings. He cast a benevolent, pitying glance in my direction. But that is what the holidays are for. Forgiveness, unity, because at the end of the day, when the markets close and the noise stops, we only have one thing. He raised his glass higher. Family, Harold declared. Family means everything, the room murmured in agreement. Here, someone whispered. Does it? The voice cut through the murmur like a knife. It wasn't my voice. It was Marcus. My brother stepped away from the wall. He walked into the center of the circle, interrupting the toast. He didn't look at our father. He looked at our mother, Diane, who was standing next to Harold with a frozen smile plastered on her face. Marcus, sit down, Harold said, his voice dropping to a warning growl. You are interrupting. I am asking a question, Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly but gaining strength with every word. If family means everything, Dad, then why did Mom look at her 10-year-old grandson on Christmas Eve and tell him, only family gets to eat? The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. You could hear the crackle of the logs in the fireplace. You could hear the ice shifting in glasses. Diane's smile faltered. She laughed, a high, nervous sound. Oh, Marcus, don't be dramatic. It was a joke. Everyone knows it was a joke. I didn't laugh, I said. I stepped forward. I moved into the light. I felt the eyes of 40 people shift to me. My son didn't laugh, I continued, keeping my voice conversational, factual. He cried. He asked me if we were still part of this family, and when I left to take him home, to feed him the dessert you denied him. I thought that was the end of it. Faith, stop this, Kelsey hissed from the sidelines. You are embarrassing yourself. I ignored her. I looked directly at Mrs. Montgomery. I looked at the Reverend. I thought it was just cruelty, I told the room. But the next morning, I woke up to 33 missed calls from my mother. She left me voicemails screaming that they were sealing everything. She told me to call a lawyer. That is a lie, Diane shouted, abandoning her poise. I was worried about you. You were hysterical. I have the transcripts. Mother, I said calmly. I tapped the black bag. I have the voicemails, and I have the email from Arthur Vance threatening me with tax liabilities if I didn't sign a waiver within 6 hours. I turned back to the guests. They didn't call 33 times because they missed their grandson. They called because my father has a bridge loan maturing on December 31st. He used the family cabin, the one my name is on, as collateral for a high-risk tech park development that failed. He needs my signature to refinance the debt before the bank seizes his assets. Harold's face turned a violent shade of purple. You ungrateful little traitor, I built this life for you. You built a house of cards, I said, and you tried to use my son's inheritance to prop it up. She is lying, Diane shrieked, looking around wildly for an ally. She is unstable. She has been unstable since the divorce. She made up that quote. I never said that to Evan. I would never starve a child. She looked at Mrs. Higgins. Martha, you were there. Tell them. Faith is imagining things. Mrs. Higgins, the quiet retired nurse who lived 3 houses down, stood by the buffet table. She held a plate of appetizers. She looked at Diane, then she looked at me. I heard you, Diane. Mrs. Higgins said clearly. The room gasped. I was standing right behind the sofa. Mrs. Higgins continued. You took the spoon out of the boy's hand. You ate the pudding while he watched. And you said, only family gets to eat. It didn't sound like a joke to me. It sounded mean. Diane froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The social mask she had worn for 30 years shattered on the floor. The neighbors were exchanging looks of horror, looks of realization. It was a lesson, Diane stammered, pivoting desperately. Evan is too soft. Kids these days need to learn resilience. You used the word family as a weapon, I said. You defined family as a club that you can kick people out of whenever you want control. Well, you succeeded. We are out. Get out of my house, Harold roared. He slammed his glass down on the mantelpiece so hard that liquor splashed onto the stone. You want to talk about money, fine. You get nothing. I will cut you out of the will. I will drain that LLC dry before you see a penny. You are dead to me. You can't drain it, Dad, I said. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out the whole binder. I pulled out a single, stapled document. It was the filing receipt from the court, stamped at 4 o'clock that afternoon. This is a petition for a partition of interest, I said, holding it up. My lawyer filed it today. I have formally requested that my 15% ownership in Stewart Heritage Holdings be separated and placed into a constructive trust for Evan. I have also filed a motion for an injunction against any refinancing, selling, or encumbering of the property until a forensic audit is complete. Harold stared at the paper. His hands began to shake. You blocked the refinance, he whispered. The bank has already been notified, I said. They won't touch that cabin with a 10-foot pole now that there is active litigation on the title. Your deadline is Tuesday. You are not going to make it. You ruined us, Kelsey screamed, stepping forward. Her face twisted. You selfish witch. You ruined everything. I also submitted the invoices for Lakeside Lifestyle Consulting, I said, looking at my sister. $45,000. Kelsey, do you want to explain to the Reverend what exactly you consulted on, or should we let the IRS figure that out during the audit? Kelsey went pale. She stepped back, shrinking into the crowd. This is not a family, Harold spat, veins bulging in his neck. You are an enemy. I am a creditor, I corrected him, and I am collecting what is owed to my son. I turned to Marcus. My father followed my gaze. Marcus, he commanded, tell her she is insane. Fix this. Marcus looked at the father who had terrified him for 40 years. He looked at the mother who had manipulated his every emotion. Then he looked at me. I filed my petition too. Dad, Marcus said softly. Harold staggered back as if he had been shot. What? I filed for a partition of my 15%, Marcus said. I am locking my share in a trust too. You can't use me as a backup account anymore. I am not your retirement plan, and I am not your peacekeeper. Marcus took off his glasses and wiped them, a gesture of finality. Faith is right. Only family gets to eat. And tonight, I am going to eat with my sister. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. The guests were looking at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at the ruined king and queen standing by the fireplace. They knew the party was over. They knew the reputation of the Stewart family had just been demolished, not by rumors, but by facts. We are leaving now, I said. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say I was sorry. I turned around and walked toward the door. Marcus was right beside me. We walked through the foyer, past the banner that said, Reconciliation, and out into the cold, clean winter night, behind us. I heard the first murmurs of the crowd starting up, the frantic, hushed whispers of scandal that would tear through Brookfield by morning. But I didn't care. I got into my car. My hands were steady on the wheel. I drove home. When I unlocked my front door, the house was quiet. Mrs. Gable was asleep in the armchair, a book open on her lap. The TV was playing the credits of a superhero movie. On the couch, wrapped in a blanket, was Evan. He was fast asleep, his mouth slightly open, a smudge of chocolate on his cheek. I tipped Mrs. Gable, thanked her, and walked her to the door. Then I sat down on the edge of the couch. I brushed the hair off Evan's forehead. He stirred and opened his eyes. They were sleepy and confused. Mom, he whispered, is the party over? Yeah, buddy, I said softly. The party is over. Did you bring the cake? He asked. I smiled. I felt a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt in 35 years. No, I said. I left it there. We don't need their cake. We have our own. I pulled him into a hug. He felt solid and real, so much warmer than the heat of that mansion. Evan, I said, whispering into his hair, I want you to remember something. Family isn't about who has the biggest house, and it isn't about who controls the money. What is it? He mumbled. Family is the place where you are safe. I said, family is the place where people apologize when they are wrong. And family is the place where you never, ever have to beg to be fed. Okay, he said, closing his eyes again. I love you, Mom. I love you too. I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind howl outside. I knew what was coming. The lawsuits, the angry texts, the smear campaigns. My father would fight. My mother would victimize herself. But they couldn't touch me. Not anymore. I hadn't burned the family down. I had simply stopped standing in the fire and calling it home. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't hungry. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts on Faith's decision. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.